Okay, friend. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So, Rumaan, I have been looking forward to this conversation for so many months that I don't even know. Okay, here's where I'm going to start. So, because you are my actual friend, I I got to do something which I really love to do, which is like live text someone when I'm reading their book and be like, I'm on page 37,
Right.
I'm on page
Right.
78. Oh my
That's
God,
right.
who knows? You know. Um, and so I feel like I knew very, very early on, in like while reading this book, that this was going to be an all-star smash. Um, and it gives me great pleasure to say that I was goddamn right. And the last time I felt this way was about Emily Mandel's book, Station 11, which was like,
Mm,
I think that, this is your third book. Station 11 was Emily's fourth book, but I think in
mm,
both cases, I felt so clear that it was so clear to me that I was watching someone I loved, both as a human and as a writer, like just shoot themselves into outer space. So I knew that this book was going to do that immediately. But when did you have a sense? When did you have a sense that, I don't know, that something different was happening? Is that a fair
I
question?
mean, I think it's like, well, my approach to it would be different, right? Like what you're saying is like, you think I did it. But what I would say to you is like, there was a sense of aspiration inside of it that I knew going into my third book that I wanted. So at some point, I realized that my first two books, like I had been so proud of myself on my second book. I was like, I really pushed myself artistically. And then over time, I would realize that, in fact, the second book and the first book are very, very similar. Very, very similar. They're about the intimacy between two women who are very different kinds of women. So I had repeated myself without necessarily intending to. And I think a lot of people do that. I think you do that when you're trying to figure out what your territory is. Um, and I knew that I wanted to do more on this book. And if for no other reason than the simple fact that it was my last book under contract with HarperCollins. And I was like, well, they've already paid me. So they're already obligated to publish this book, unless it's garbage. I guess they could have ripped up the contract and kicked me to the curb. And I was like, I should really push. I should really push. I know more about how to write a novel. I've learned something about how to write a novel, and I should push to do what I really want to do. And what I really wanted to do was to take the vacation novel, which I don't have to tell you, of all people, is a very particular kind of convention in fiction, and push right through it into the political novel, into the world, to go through the domestic into the very big. And that was what I wanted to do. I mean, it's up to the readers to decide if I did it, but that was the aspiration. So I do think you are right. I mean, I think you can smell it. I think you can tell, because you know me. When I say you, I mean you, Emma Straub. Like, you can tell that I was up to something.
Yeah, but I mean, yes, I can. And I think that, like, you know, I, I could see, and it was really it's really fun to see. I think not just as with any writer whose work you like, it's fun to see someone like, sort of break out in a direction you hadn't anticipated. um but I think that, like, I mean, you describe your first two books as having this sort of, you know similarity. And I think that, like, one of the things that I think is um so beautiful about this book is that, like, I think that a lot of people, sorry, I'm like cutting off my head. Okay, sorry. I think that a lot of people will look at this book, people who haven't maybe read your previous books will look at the description of this and the sort of, like, sort of mysterious descriptions of things that happen in it, and then look at the descriptions of your two previous novels and think that they are totally different.
Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like the two books I mean, as you just described them, are about you know, friendships between women who are really different. And I feel like in this book, it's not a friendship between two women who are really different, but it's about an uneasy alliance. You know, it's about
Yeah.
characters who think they're really different, or who may be, God, I am going to try so hard to spoiler free, because this book, I mean, just so all of you know, there are a lot of
Yeah.
here, and I do not want to spoil this book for you, because the part of the real fun of reading it and what makes it so propulsive is that I don't want to tell you what's going to happen. So I'm gonna be really spare in when I talk about details from the book, but I do think that, like, you know, I think that that sort of, you know, personal friction is present in this book too. But it's the tone is what is different, and the tone is scary. It's a suspenseful book. It's a suspenseful book that turns into a scary book. I would say. So
I mean, yeah, like you're always kind of stuck in your own sensibility. Like it's you can't like escape the things that you're interested in. I'm interested in the way like wealthy people respond to like their role in society. I'm interested in like well-heeled people cooking food. I'm interested in like descriptions of people buying stuff. I love that stuff. And like that's just what I'm attracted to working out artistically, you know, punching out on the sentence level. And I guess maybe the aim is different in this book. And as you said, like the book is there's an atmosphere in the book that is different from the first two books. The first two books have a kind of genteel meander to them, and this book is a little more like you are inside of the book and you are going on a ride. And I mean, I'm not normally someone who cares about spoilers, but I'm mindful of the fact that like there's a particular experience you can have if you don't know what's going to happen in this book that can feel like, I hope, powerful and exciting. And that as you're reading it, you're like, oh my God, I thought this was going to be a book about people going on vacation to Long Island. Now I realize it's actually going to be this weird comedy of manners about people confronting the Black owners of this home. And then there's yet another revolution where the book actually turns into being about something else altogether.
Yeah.
You know?
It's amazing. So, okay. So what I guess my next question is like, why, not why, because why not, but how did you prepare? Like, what did you have to tweak in your like toolkit? Barf.
What I'm sorry, am I getting an MFA right now? I didn't realize that's what we were doing here.
What did you,
in order to understand how to build suspense, in order to understand like how to
like how did you like, did you read a lot of suspenseful things or scary things?
I wouldn't say a lot.
Did you stay at Laura Lippman's house and like absorb?
I did stay at Laura Lippman's house, so that probably helped. But I read Pet Sematary, which is a really, really, truly scary book, which I highly recommend. But the truth is that like narrative, especially narrative that contains thrill or fright, is really a big part of the culture. You don't even have to like really be someone who watches a lot of horror movies to understand how horror movies function, right? Like you're in a strange place, you encounter a stranger, you're part of a group, someone gets separated from the group, like a strange, inexplicable thing happens, no explanation is offered for that thing. Somebody experiences something that happens to their body, somebody experiences something sexy. Like these are sort of like conventions of that storytelling. And so you can deploy those conventions and the reader kind of knows how to make sense of them.
Yeah.
Right. So towards the end of the book, one person gets separated from the rest of the people. And I feel like there's a part of you that is like, oh yeah, I know what's up here because I've seen a movie before. I know what's going to happen. And if the narrative chooses not to deal with that the way that you are necessarily expecting, it can feel kind of like electric and weird and kind of fun. So I think that you have access to those conventions as a reader, but also just as like someone who lives in the culture. You know that like a knock on the door late at night means something different than a knock on the door in the afternoon. You know that when the white person opens the door and there's a black person standing there who they haven't been expecting, it's a particular kind of narrative convention. It's sort of like you're prepped to deal with that as a reader.
Yeah. Okay, you did not answer my question. So
how did I learn how to do that? I don't know. I didn't learn. I just I don't know.
No, it's not how you learn, but like how, like what, I don't know. I guess like
I'll give you a very concrete answer.
Okay.
Short chapters.
Short chapters.
The chapters are very short. I gave myself a lot less territory to lose myself. You know?
Yeah.
I had to be much more restrained in what I was going to go on about. I do love to go on as a writer, as you may know. I do love a like long chatty sentence. And there is still a long scene in the beginning where Amanda, the protagonist, goes grocery shopping and it sort of enumerates everything that she buys. But I would argue that like it's still like an efficiently designed book, and that like that 4 or 5 page description of her grocery shopping accomplishes something. Mm-hmm. And it's still moving kind of efficiently, and it's happening early in the book before you understand the rhythm of the book. Mm-hmm. And then as the book goes on, it speeds up. Towards the end, there's a chapter that ends with an M dash. Like it sort of like it loses its punctuation even because it's trying to pull you into the next chapter. It's like little stuff like that that just like is making the reading experience hopefully more propulsive. I mean, I don't know if readers will have that experience, but I think that that's like part of the design of the thing.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, for sure it is. So, okay, so one of the decisions that you clearly made when approaching material that is suspenseful. Again, this is spoiler-free question. I felt as a reader, I felt really aware of the decisions that you had made about what to hold back. That like there's, you know, I mean, there are certain, you know, as you say, there's a knock at the door. Do you find out who those people are? Yes, right. So like there are certain moments that feel tense and suspenseful that you know, become resolved, and the reader feels like they fully understand what's going on. But there are also a lot of moments that feel you know, that where I feel like someone could have been writing the same book and take a really different turn. Yeah. But you kept everything really close, and so I wondered a little bit, like I wondered if you could talk about sort of, without giving spoilers, like how you decided where that line was, like what you wanted to include and what you didn't.
I just realized actually that there is a book that I'm not acknowledging a huge debt to that kind of answers this question. And that book is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, which is truly a masterpiece, like an actual masterpiece of fiction. Yeah. And if you think about how that book works, it is a book that I've only read once because I'm so afraid to read it again. Mm. But if you think about how that book works, at least as I recall it functioning, the book answers, each chapter like establishes like 5 questions, and then the subsequent chapter answers like 1 of those 5 while introducing yet 5 more. Mm-hmm. So you keep going on because the book is so enchanting. You're dying to figure out exactly what is happening. and you kind of over time understand a little bit of what's happening. And then there's a point in the book in which everything kind of lands in place. And you're like, holy shit.
Mm.
Now I understand that these are not people, these are not students in a boarding school. These are people who are being harvested for their bodies. It's such a horrifying,
Talk about
imaginative moment. Yeah.
spoilers.
Yeah.
I bet.
Spoiler alert for this like 14-year-old book, but I mean it's such an astonishing, the way he lays it out is so astonishing. Clearly he knew what he was doing, and he is parceling the information out to us.
Yeah.
And I think that was really instructive. And I guess by contrast, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm talking about in this book. So what I'm offering you is little tiny things to hold on to, because I recognize that the sense of amorphous fear that is ultimately like subsumes the book needed some definition. So you needed to be able to see something. You needed to be able to understand something. The scariest thing that happens, the most tangibly scary thing that happens in this book happens to somebody's body, I think. And, you know, I needed that moment, because there's so much vagueness until that point, and then something bad has to happen to someone's body, because there's a kind of primal response that I think readers have, especially because it happens to someone's teeth. And I think we all have like a weird, like there's like a powerful thing about our relationship to teeth, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and Rumaan, like I was really gonna get through this without any spoilers whatsoever. Okay, I'm gonna.
I mean, that's like a mild spoiler,
So,
but yeah.
so okay, so I'm gonna ask a follow-up question without directly connecting the two. So this book, I think for me felt like it was as much, maybe not quite as much about parenthood as your last book, but that, like, you know, that your last book really focused on early parenthood. Like that was one of, that wasn't all it was about, obviously, but that was one, you know, where the characters' focus was really about the sort of care and caretaking and balance of very, very small children. But this book, to me, I mean, and, you know, maybe this is also just like sort of where I'm, you know, like where I'm looking ahead, but this book to me felt also very much like a book about parenthood, where, you know, sort of where the moment that you go from, you know, those like early parenting days, you know, where you have this like little lump where you're like, okay, no, it's my turn. I'm going to sleep for 15 minutes, then you wait 15 minutes, and then you're going to feed the baby. And then, you know, like where you're like, and if we do these things, everything is fine. It's moving from that kind of parenting more toward like into, you know, into parenting of real children who will become adults, you know, like older people who have personalities. I don't know, it's not really a question.
It's correct. It's an accurate statement. I mean, my access point to a lot of my work is parenting, you know, and it's just like, that's just what it is. Like, you're sort of, I mean, I've never really been a like write what you know person. I think it's like so dumb, like who cares what I know? But it's more about like, you build from the raw material you have at hand. And that's family life in my case. That's provided me like a language to make a novel. And I also think in this particular book, it provides an access point for the reader, because you don't have to be a parent to have some kind of relationship to the idea that children are the future of the species, right? And so there's a reason that people, parents and non-parents alike, are like revulsed by Law and Order SVU when it's about like a child rapist, right? Like there's a reason that babies in all of their roundness are so powerful on everybody, like baby crazy people, and even like people who are sort of indifferent to babies can't help, you're sort of wired to care about these like lumpy little creatures. And so your investment in the children in this book, who are not babies, but I think is playing on your investment in like the future of the planet, the future of the species. And I hope it's effective on people who are not parents, but certainly the access point for me is my own experience in parenthood.
Yeah.
You know?
And you mentioned earlier, that part of your beat is like rich people and their stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that I think that one thing that is often interesting about rich people and their stuff is their children, who do or don't sort of follow in line with whatever the sort of rules are that they've set up, especially at the children in this novel are older, like really nearly at the point of separation, right? And so it's I think it's interesting. You can see, I think looking at these kids, it's like underscoring certain things about the parents, where you get to see the same way you can in real life, with people's children. You get to see like, oh yes, this part came across very like this where you see this is what has truly been drilled into these kids in ways good and bad. Okay, so guys, everyone listening, I sort of forgot that there were other people here. Okay, so if you have questions for Rumaan, which I know you do, put them in the Q&A box down here. Okay, some of you have, and that's good. But
I love this. I love this question from Kate Gavino. That's such a good question.
Okay.
Not to distract.
Okay.
You're still in charge. Oh, I'm not reading. I'm just following orders.
Okay, Rumaan.
So.
Okay. All right. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to go into the Q&A.
Do it.
So, and this is my own weird flex. Okay. So in like 2007 maybe, or 2008, I was an editor of a literary magazine, and I published a story by my friend Rumaan Alam, National Book Award finalist. And in that story, I can't remember anything about this story, Rumaan, that you wrote, except that there were this one detail, which was that there were like 14 garbage cans in this house.
That's right.
And
wow, good memory. Great memory.
Well, thank you. But great detail. And so here's my question for you. So I think that one of your like superhero strengths as a writer is set design. Like, I feel like it's one of those things that a lot of people, a lot of writers don't think much about. But when I read your books, I always feel like I have walked fully into a room, and I can see everything. Like, I can see this house perfectly. So my question for you, I guess, is like how you, if whether setting in that kind of way, in that kind of micro way, is part of the way you find your way into things.
Yeah, I have a couple of things to say about this. First of all, as I described in the beginning of the book, when Amanda goes grocery shopping and we hear in some detail about the things she buys, In this culture, maybe all global cultures at this point, the things that we buy are the story of who we are. It's the story of who we believe ourselves to be. So we establish a sense of identity via thing, via object. So that thing, that experience of going to the grocery store and spending $200 on organic nectarines and cilantro with the sand still on the bottom of it, and the heirloom tomatoes that come in that really crinkly cellophane, is Amanda telling us the story of who she is. The stuff with which we surround ourselves in our home is our way of telling that story. And interestingly, it's the way that we tell that story in a very intimate way. We tell it to the people in the home. The home is not a place for other people to digest. It's like the rough draft of our own story.
Mm.
So there's something there too. And the third answer, which is so like weird but true, is that I am face blind and I don't know what anyone looks like. And I don't think I have ever in any of my work described what somebody looks like, because to me, fundamentally, everybody looks the same, like a blank. I just cannot see. I can see things like a very pronounced monobrow, like that. That makes sense to me. But when readers talk about like upturned nose, I don't really know what that means. And I don't really see in that way. And so I see in terms of things in a weird way. And I think that that's really a useful point of access for me. And also in this particular book, it's underscored by the fact that this is very, autobiographical isn't quite the word, but it is very much based on a home that I stayed in with my family. Mm-hmm. I mean, down to the detail. Like when my husband read the book, he was like, wow, this is really that house that we stayed in. I mean, I improved it a little in the fiction, like it's bigger and grander in the fiction, but it's very, it's very literal in a weird way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like being able to see a place. I love being able to see a place. I find that really illuminating, you know.
Okay, Kate Gavino. Here's Kate's question. Okay, throughout the book, you drop in chilling details about what's happening in the rest of the world, i.e. spoilers galore. Okay, did you do a lot of research into these small references because they scared TF out of me?
I did not do any research to answer Kate's question. So Kate's question is about like, the book offers these sort of like very loaded asides and says, oh, somewhere else right now in the world, this thing is happening. Somewhere else in the world, this thing is happening. And I just tried to think of stuff that felt scary, but I also tried to think of stuff that felt like it contained meaning, even if it was hard to say what that meaning was. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like, that's how we try to make sense of things retrospectively. Do you ever hear that Gillian Welch album where she sings a song about how like on that one day in April, Lincoln was shot and what else happened? Lincoln was shot and the Titanic sunk? Was it the same day? I don't know. Somebody in the chat right now is like, oh, you fucking idiot, you have it all wrong. But there's some really great Gillian Welch song talking about, I think it's the 14th of April. Anyway, that's how we try to make sense of things. We try to take facts and slot them into our narrative. And to answer Kate's question, like I've said this before, but it's what I want the reader to feel like Claire Danes in Homeland. Like you're taking this fact and this fact and this fact and you're putting them up on the wall and you're like, okay, what am I getting? What am I supposed to make of this? Yeah. And I think the answer eludes you. It eludes even me. I don't really know what you're supposed to make of it.
Okay, here, let's look at these other questions. Oh, sorry, the flex came up from a different question. I just loved that the word flex is in all caps. Okay, so this is a question from someone named Marnie. Okay, so hello, first I just wanted to say that this book is such a flex, and the grocery list and your use of exclamation points have had a huge impact on my writing. Already, wow. Okay, I wanted to ask, what to you are the advantages of writing from a female character's perspective? That is a very interesting question. Are there things you feel are easier to achieve or easier to get away with if the book's perspective comes from a woman? That's a good question.
Yes, I do. And I think it has to mostly do with my own life. So when I take the stuff of my own life and I throw it into the voice of a fictional person, if that person is a woman, somehow that throws everybody off of the scent. Mm. Somehow it feels so removed from me that it feels muddy. Not that it's important for me to feel hidden, because it's not important, but like somehow I feel a liberty to talk about myself when I'm bearing it inside of a fiction. And when that fiction is a person who's a different sex than me, somehow it feels more doable and achievable. And also, that's a lovely question. And just to say about her point about the exclamation marks or, you know, the grocery list, one of my, I mean, a lot of people blurbed this book and really beautifully said really beautiful things about it. One of my favorite things anyone has said about this book is what Dan Shawn said about it, which is that it is a comic novel. And I think that is so, so lovely. I think that is such a generous statement because I think the book is really funny. And I think that there's a lot in there that's really funny. And I think that it can be difficult to understand. The book is so destabilizing by design that I think it can be hard to understand at the beginning that you're meant to laugh, that you're meant to see this person buying all these groceries and be like, God, this is,
Yeah.
I know who this person is, you know?
Yeah. Well, of course, that's what, I mean, you know, I don't know if you would call this book a horror novel. I don't know if I would call this book a horror novel, but I think that it has certain things in common with some horror, And
Yeah, I think so too.
I think that, you know, for anyone who has watched a lot of horror movies are always funny. Not always, not always.
Yeah, that's a good.
But many many of them
Yeah.
are. And also not
Yeah.
for nothing, like, you know, Dan Shawn has a sick sense of humor. And I think, you know, I think of him. So I should say, maybe I didn't say this. Rumaan and I went to college together. And so we both had the same professors, some of whom are in the chat tonight. And so I should say that. That's my disclaimer. I don't know.
I don't know why. I don't know why you're ethically bound to disclose that, but it is true. It is true. It's accurate.
Okay, wait, here's another question. Okay, Rachel Fertilizer asks, of all the incredible things that have happened for this book, which is the one that was most shocking, and how did you react or celebrate?
I mean, I couldn't possibly say which was the most shocking because they've all been shocking. Selling the book as a film feels disconnected in a way from the endeavor of the book itself. It's a wonderful thing that happened, but it feels like something amazing that happened, but I see it less within the context of the publishing of this particular book. Being on the long list for the National Book Award, I wanted to drop dead. I mean, I really wanted to just fall over. Like I just didn't compute. My book came out today, and my book was on the short list for the National Book Award. Similarly, barely computed, right? Like I was told that information at 10:33. And I teach at 10:35. So I was in a class with my students who are amazing. This week we were talking about television. So I celebrated by like being with my students. I mean, I think that like this good news is great. And I don't mean to pretend that it isn't. It's extraordinary and so satisfying and so thrilling. But, you know, I think it's also important to just like focus on what your endeavor is. Like, you know, I can't like, I'm happy. I'm really, really happy. But like, my responsibility is not just to sit around and be happy. It's to like attend to the publishing of this book, to teach my students, to like try to be a good spouse, which God knows I'm like really, I don't know if I'm coming up short there. My poor husband's birthday was yesterday, and I spent the whole day talking about myself on the telephone to reporters. But you know, I think you can't like, it's a complicated thing. I think you have to savor your victories where you find them, no matter what you do for a living. But you also have to be able to understand them as like a step and a thing. And you just need to like you just say, okay, I feel great. Now I got to get back to business. I got to like deal with my life, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, my thought, Rachel did not ask me, but I mean, my thought about great things happening to creative people is that it doesn't do anything to your life, except give you a little more time and a little more freedom to do the next thing. Like that's, I
I
mean,
think
that,
that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
you know, like
I think that's right. And that's
that's
still
the,
elusive. Like that's like in the future, right? Like so in the future things will be a little different for me. And that's an extraordinary gift and I'm conscious of it. But you know, I also am like very aware. Like when I say, I mean, I feel like when I say this, people don't believe me, but I mean it. Like, what if I never get to publish a book again? It happens all the time. It happens to really great writers who deserve many more opportunities. Like, there's simply no guarantees in this particular endeavor, and you're crazy if you think that they are. You're
yeah.
deluding yourself. So I think like I'm best served by like, you know, staying focused. But I will celebrate. I will buy myself a pair of shoes. I'm having a drink right now with Emma. Like, you know, I will celebrate. I will enjoy, you know, especially this is such a shitty year in so many big ways. So this tiny little bit of good news is like nice. It's nice for me to have like a
Oh
little bit of good
God,
news for sure, you know.
your good news is nice for me too, Rumaan. It's like it makes me so happy. It makes me so happy. Okay, so
Oh,
here's
shitty time.
so I think we have time for one more question. So I'm gonna oh God. I mean, I do want to ask about Julia Roberts and Denzel Washington, um, but I'm trying to be a perfectionist.
We could spend an hour on that.
I know. Um, okay, I'm gonna be a grown up, and I'm not gonna ask if you have been on Zooms with Julia Roberts and Denzel Washington.
Oh, you know, I haven't been on Zooms with Denzel Washington or
Okay.
Julia Roberts, unfortunately. A lot of
Okay.
conference calls and but never with them. Maybe someday. Maybe
Okay.
someday.
Someday. We'll wait. Okay.
I'm gonna
Um,
need that to happen in person because it's only me. It only has happened if I can Instagram it, right? Like I need that. I need that to be an Instagrammable moment. As much as I would love to talk to Denzel Washington on the telephone, I would have to be like, "Listen, Mr. Washington, I'm gonna need you to take out your phone and take a picture of yourself and take a picture of my phone number on the screen of your phone so I can prove that this is actually happening."
yeah.
Um, Someday that'll happen.
I did see Julia Roberts in person once at the J. Crew in Williamsburg, Brooklyn.
Whoa, that's a good sighting.
It was the most it was the most surprised I have ever been. Like I was undone by it. And
Wow.
it took me hours to like
Wow.
normal
Yeah.
speed. Which I wasn't expecting. Like I, you know, if you had asked me like that
Yeah.
morning, if you ran
Yeah.
into Julia Roberts on the street, would you like
Did you have some feeling about it? Yeah.
in your
Yeah.
resume? I would have said like I'm a New Yorker. You know what? I don't know. I
Right.
wouldn't have said it like
Right.
in that weird voice, but I would have said that. But then I did see her, and I was unable to function. Okay. So I apologize for everyone who's asking questions. Okay. So the last question that I'm gonna ask is about what you're reading, Rumaan, because you are a good reader, and I think that
Mm.
one of the things that I love about you as a reader is that I think of you as if not a completist, then
Mm.
like
Mhm.
I don't know what's the word, I don't know,
A
like
deep diver.
a
A
deep
deep
dive.
diver.
Yeah,
Yeah. I like to deep dive. I
yeah.
like to deep
So
dive.
so
It's true.
who are some writers who you have read many books by that you think that are who you would describe as underread in contemporary literature?
Well, I mean, I think everyone is underread because we don't read enough in this culture. I think underread is like a difficult metric to establish because when you say that, there's always someone who's like, I read that in college or I teach that every year, you know? So I think that there are certain writers who have who reward, and like you can go into book after book after book and feel rewarded. And I have over the last 7 years done this rather obsessively with Willa Cather is a great one. That's a huge body of work and a very varied body of work. These books are so much more modern than I think anyone is ever expecting them to be. Um, Willa Cather, A Lost Lady is like the saddest book I've ever read in my life. The Professor's House is the most like bizarre little modern book I've ever read. It's pretty crazy that it was written so long ago. Extraordinary, really, really yields to the contemporary reader. Saul Bellow is another one. I read Saul Bellow when I was writing my second book, and I just couldn't. It's like, you know, he's one of those writers who's like, you know, he's good. You know, he's good. He won the Nobel Prize. Of course, he's good. And then you read it and you think, my God, this is so much better than I even thought it was possible to be. And I can't stop myself from reading everything that exists. And there's a lot that exists. And that's a huge body of work that's really good to sink into. Anita Brookner is the other one who I talk about a lot. Really big body of work. What I love about that work is that it's almost all the same. And so it was the same book over and over and over again. You see the same sensibility, the same people, the same ideas worked out again and again and again. She was like a very stubborn mind who really wanted to resolve a question that she asked herself over the course of many books. And I think the last writer I did this with was Patrick Modiano, and I'm still sort of engaged in it because it's a really big body of work, although the books are individually quite short. Patrick Modiano too, like I didn't know anything about him, that he won the Nobel Prize, that's all I knew. I worked at the New York Times at the time, and there was a bookshelf where you could just go and take the books, which is like kind of an insane perk. And there was a book and I saw it, it was called So You Don't Get Lost in the Neighborhood. And I thought, oh, well, this dude won the Nobel Prize and this book is really tiny. I should just read it. I should just take this book and read it. It's like a perk of my job. And I read it and I felt like I was having a stroke. I've never read a book that made me feel this way before. It looks like it makes sense, but it actually doesn't make any sense. And then that becomes the logic of his fictional world. And each of the books works in the same way, I think. It's extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. But I think this is the kind of thing that you can't go wrong. Like you can choose any writer really and like dive in because when you spend time with somebody like that, like I read all of Laurie Moore's work for a review that I published of her collected stories earlier this year. When you sink into a body of work, and Laurie Moore, maddeningly to me, her body of work is not as big. I always wish it was bigger because I think she's such an extraordinary writer. But when you immerse yourself in that, you learn something. You learn something about the writer in question. You learn about like their evolution. I don't know, you see something, and there are so many writers you could do that with. There's so many, and yeah, I'm looking at like my kids' cabinet full of garbage is open right now, and I can see Goodbye Columbus, and I can see the Satanic Verses, and I can see a Bruce Chatwin book, and I can see an Alice Munro book, and it's like every one of those are writers who you could spend a really long time reading and thinking about what they were trying to do, and feel richer for it, you know.